Now let's build the spikes on the front of the head. So you can see here I've got two of these nulls with the same effectors and the cloner underneath for this spline back here, and then these spikes up on the front. And we can go ahead and use the same setup to do the spikes on the very front, which are more like, I don't know, they're more floppy. They're a little bit, they point the other direction. They're a little bit wider, something that's a little bit different. So you can see that I actually split this initial spline up here into two splines, so that I could have these spikes and then these spikes on the front. So now I've got head spline 1 and head spline 2. Head spline 1 is going to be the one that I'll use for this. So if you want to just grab that point and break, go ahead and break that apart, break segment, then you can split that into another spline. So we'll use this spline up here. So let's go ahead and use the existing hierarchy that we have. So we have one for head spikes, and I've actually got an extra letter in there, so go ahead and rename this. So control drag this down, and under the spline effector we want to simply go in and choose, instead of head spline 2, we want head spline 1. So go into our spline effector, replace that with head spline 1, and you can see now it's using the same settings to now create those spikes on the front, but we want them to be a little bit different. So we'll go ahead and say head spikes front. Okay, so we can go into our spline under the parameters. We can turn on, let's say, rotation. We want them to be pointed a little bit more forward. We want to change under the random. We want to change the position just a little bit. I also want to decrease the number of clones, so I'll go ahead and take that number down a little bit. And then under the actual geometry, I want to take the circle and I want to make it a little bit wider. So maybe something like that. Okay? And then we can go into the spline here. We can change the rotation of these. So let's go ahead and, under the spline parameters, let's go ahead and kind of rotate these around so they're kind of pointing down. And I'll kind of bring them back here, kind of lift them up a little bit. Again, I want to add a little bit more randomization in here. Maybe add a little bit of randomization here. In the circle, I'm going to go ahead and make this a bit smaller. Okay. And then again in the random, let's go ahead and under the rotation, add a little bit more randomness into the rotation of these. Okay, then I want to take the spline itself and push it down into the head a little bit more. So go ahead and bring this down, bring this in. Okay, and you can look at the geometry here. Again, you don't need to match it up exactly, but if you want to bring this down a little bit further, you can do that. But now it's, you can see there's more randomization in the rotation and also in the position of these. So a little bit of a kind of an asymmetrical look. If you want to add a couple of more clones in there, you can do that. Let me take down the rotation a little bit. Take down the randomization on that a little bit, so it's a little bit more regular. All right, so that's one way to do it, is just to use your pre-existing hierarchy and then replace the spline, because the spline is really driving into the spline effector and it's telling it where to actually place those clones. Otherwise, you're using the same geometry. Okay, so you can see we've got the same effectors, the same cloner, same geometry. We've tweaked it a little bit, and this spline effector is the key because you can input the new splines. We've got the tail spline and then the two head splines, each one of these driving into the different hierarchies here. Okay, so I know if you haven't used Cinema 4D, it seems a little bit complicated, but it really is a powerful and flexible way to work in dropping this all these things into hierarchies and letting it generate that geometry for you. In many cases, can be really key, and then you can convert that after. So you could come in here. Let me grab this spline and just pull it down into the surface a little bit more. You want those to be kind of down into the surface of the head a little bit, so you might want to narrow it down just a little. Take that down just a little bit. All right. So once you've got those spikes, and feel free to experiment with other spikes and different things you can add to this guy. The next thing that we want to add is actually will give us an opportunity to kind of do that, and that is going to be building the teeth. So we'll go ahead and do that next.